In today's episode, we are very pleased to welcome Dr. Zhang, the Managing Director of Economic Advisory at Deloitte China. He is an expert in international economics and macroeconomics with a particular focus on the Chinese economy. Dr. Zhang talks to us about exciting topics from China's economic resilience in a changing global market to emerging innovation trends and demographic shifts. He also shared personal reflections on his career path, optimism, and what it takes to succeed in China. As always, we hope you enjoy the episode and we would be very delighted if you would leave us a review. And now, please join us in welcoming Dr. Zhang.
Made in China. Von der Werkbank der Welt zum größten Konsumentenmarkt und Technologieführer. Eine Reise durch das Leben, Business und die Kultur im Reich der Mitte mit Damian Maib und Thomas Derksen.
A very warm welcome to one of our English episodes of our Made in China podcast. I also need some time to get warm with English because most of the time our podcast is in German, but we are very happy and pleased to have a special guest. And for special guests, we are very happy to do some English content. And as most of our listeners are living in China, traveling to China a lot, traveling around the world, they are very happy to listen to some English episodes now and then. We are in our office in Shanghai, very happy to have Dr. Zhang here with us. We met the last time at the farewell party of Rajat when he left China and went to the US. Welcome to our podcast.
Thanks, Thomas. It's my pleasure.
Perfect. Yeah, warm welcome from me as well. Happy to have you here.
Yeah.
Let me start with a question which you might not have prepared.
Okay.
Would you rather be able to travel back in time or see into the future, and why?
First of all, I need to make a disclaimer. So all the talk or the opinion shared today is my personal view and experience, so it does not represent my employer. And back to your question, I'm still forward-looking person, so I do prefer to look forward into the future, even though it's much more uncertain. But in my opinion, that's the beauty of life, right? There's always something that you may not expect to happen, and it could be bad, could be good. So really, I think the important thing is that have this kind of mindset to really embrace all the uncertainties that will come out in the future.
Very interesting. And most of people who were born and grow up in China are quite modest. Modesty is a very important thing in China. But can you tell us if there's one compliment that you really liked or really enjoyed, or which compliment would make you the most happy?
As a Chinese?
No, as Dr. Zhang.
Being Chinese professor.
So I think, because of my job, I usually when I meet my clients and, sometimes my friends as well in the business world, I think the most compliments I get actually is we really appreciate your insight. So of course, that's also the part that I enjoyed a lot. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, is there a habit that you have consciously trained yourself to develop in the recent years?
I think I have been intentionally to try myself on three directions. Number one is to have an open mind to think about a lot of issues right now. For some issues that can easily drag people into a situation that you focus too much on a small area or small prospect of that problem. As a matter of fact, a lot of problems are very complicated. You have to look at it from different dimensions, different angles, which requires open mind. And the second, I think is very important, is stay optimistic. I have kind of reputation among the friends like Rajat and many other CEOs is that I'm probably the most optimistic economist they have met in China and somewhat in the world about Chinese economy. So even though in the last 2 years we see some challenges, and economists are human beings as well. We see the numbers, we see what's happening to some people around us. So we know what's going on in the economy, but at the same time, I have to try myself to stay optimistic. Because only when you are optimistic, you start to think very hardly about what it can do in the future. Being a pessimistic economist means that basically it's very easy to give up. And giving up is definitely not something that I would like to do. And the third thing is very important. I try myself to be not as only an economist, but also a business people. Actually, I'm run a consulting service BU in Deloitte China. It's very small, but it's kind of, I have my own P&L. So that gives me some pressure, but at the same time, it forced me to think very carefully about how the business world works.
Yeah, and you're not only the most optimistic economist, you're also the youngest one I know. And that's very interesting. We also have a lot
But I'm still older than you too, right?
You are, but not many years older. So, but having your career path is also an inspiration, I guess, for a lot of our listeners, because a lot of our listeners are also quite young. They've just started their career, and your career started also very early, and now you are the managing director of the economic advisory at Deloitte in China. So can you tell us a little bit about your career path and how it brought you to your current position?
Okay, so actually my career path is not really a standard career path for some people in the consulting industry, because I actually came from academia background. I spent 7 years teaching in Zhang University Business School after getting my PhD in the United States back in 2013. The reason I left academia to join my first consulting job was really because the job I got at that time in 2020. I was offered a job to run a multinational senior executive networking organization in Shanghai, which contains like more than 100 multinational CEOs. I thought it was a great opportunity to really engage more with the business leaders so I can have a better understanding about the business world. When I was doing research in business school, I often feel that writing papers costs a lot of time, but you don't really have the actual understanding about how the business world really works. So, and 2020 was really an interesting time because that was the year when the COVID started. And I joined that company in October 2020. And a lot of companies are still trying to get used to this like pandemic situation. So I got the opportunity to meet a lot of CEOs from China, from AP, and from global level. And that really makes me feel that economic research actually matters for business leaders. And especially for those large multinationals, sometimes can affect their decision or strategy in China market, so which makes my work very exciting. Now, after work in that organization for 18 months, I joined Deloitte. The reason is very simple because, previously I mostly worked with CEOs. I enjoyed the work, but the thing is that mostly we talk about some like high level stuff, topics. But if we go to the business world, there are a lot of things that are very operational. So when I work in Deloitte, I have a wider client base. Now I work with multinationals. I also work with local Chinese company, a large state-owned enterprises and small POE, private-owned enterprises as well. And at the same time, the kind of topic or the kind of problem I can help my clients to resolve is wider. Not only some macroeconomic issues, but also some operational issues. So that makes the work very exciting for me. But looking back, I really think I'm fortunate to whenever I want to make a change, I always get a job offer. So I'm happy with my current job at Deloitte. And by the way, when most people think about Deloitte, they probably think Deloitte as an auditing company or firm. But actually, we are very large in terms of consulting. And especially, I think we are one of the world's largest employer of economists. We have 600 professional economists worldwide. Our China team is still relatively small, but growing.
Yeah, fantastic. And now having experienced both academia and also consulting, how does your approach to solving business and economic problems differ mostly in these two worlds?
Okay, that's a fantastic question, but before getting there, I would like to emphasize the similarity of these two first. I think either academia research, and or the consulting work for our clients, both of them actually require a very rational and careful analysis to address some issues or questions that can be easily complicated by sentimental and irrational factors. And also for both of these two kinds of work or research, you need to leverage data, you have to leverage quantitative method. So really that's the similarity between these two. Now, as for the difference, I think the foremost difference that I can feel is that for economic research, especially for academic economic research, we are really trying to get rigor first. You have to do a rigorous research. And as a result, often you have to confine your research question to a very specific, a small area, so that you can easily get very rigorous conclusion. Now, for the business consulting, sometimes the problem is not that narrowly defined. And most of the time, you don't have a textbook solution ready for you to use. So you have to improvise, you have to find new solutions. And those solutions may not be that rigorous as academic or economic research, but sometimes they can be very helpful. And also in consulting, we don't have, so when I was doing research at university, I can spend 2 years to write a paper. That's not the case in the business consulting. Typically, our consulting project is like 1 or 2 months. So you have to work out a solution as rigorous as possible in a limited amount of time.
You were talking about your research already, and you did a lot of research about China's economic landscape and international macroeconomic trends, which is very, very closely related to each other, right?
Yeah.
So which long-term trends in the Chinese economy do you find the most intriguing, and why?
I think the number one trend is, of course, China's opening up. China's policymakers are trying to push for this new type of economic opening up, which I do think is a theory strategy for the policymakers here, which means that going forward, we're going to see that China will still remain open, but with many other new factors. For example, two-way opening up. Going forward, we're not going to see like foreign companies coming to China, but also increasingly more Chinese companies going to other markets. And at the same time, when China stay open, they're going to see more regulations that makes the economic opening more sophisticated. The number two trend I think is very important is innovation, the most exciting topic for me. So I came from academic background, so I know perfectly that in academic research, China has been doing great like 10 or 20 years ago. But we look at industrial innovation, that's really the part that China has been taking off in some emerging industries like EV, renewable energy, but also in many other industries as well. So I think that this trend will also affect the Chinese economy very deeply in the next decades. And number three, of course, is demographic change, which I think it's actually a very complicated issue in China. When people think about demographic change, we think about population aging, but also there are many other aspects of the demographic change that will also fundamentally change the course of China's economic growth going forward.
Now the Chinese economy is currently facing a couple of challenges, someone could say, including slower growth. Yeah, well, at least growth, right? Some economies are not growing at all. I, as a German, can't be too proud at the moment. Right, and we are also having a little bit of a challenging property sector in China. How do you perceive China's economic resilience in comparison with other major global economies?
Yeah, I think we talk about economic resilience. Really, I think there are a lot of countries really have great resilience, not just China. But if you look at China's resilience, I think the number one factor that I personally think it's really strong, especially compared with several other major economies, is China's households. I will give you one example. So we know that in 2020, when the COVID started, if you look at all these major advanced economies, one thing we see that is the deposit amount dropped a lot. Many households in advanced economies take money out. And in China, it was quite opposite. In 2022, when really the economic growth started to slow down, have a lot of pressures, China's household deposit increased a lot. So I'll give you some kind of rough idea. Before 2022, in the last decade, every year China's household deposit increased by about 10 trillion RMB every year. In 2022, it jumped to 18 trillion RMB. In 2023, 17 trillion RMB. And this year, I think it's going to be higher even. So China's households really, we all know China has world's highest saving rate because China households really are very cautious, very well planning, try to well planning their spending. And this kind of resilience of the households really, I think, is the biggest factor of China's economic resilience. And number two factor is China's private-owned enterprises. Not just the big ones, you all know, like Huawei, like BYD, very innovative, very strong. But if you look at these smaller POEs, they're also very resilient. Just to give you one example, we know in the last 2 years, domestic demand is very strong. It's not very strong. So a lot of smaller POEs facing very challenging market situation. That's also the reason why they try very aggressively to explore foreign markets. And they're not just sit there and wait for government bailout. So this is the part of the, I think a very important part of China's economic resilience as well. And number three, we know in Chinese economy, policymakers are very important. Policy really matters a lot in China. I do think that if you look at policy-wide, China's policymakers are also very, very quick responding to a lot of new changes. For example, if you look at the current policies on economic stimulus, once it's determined that they're going to do economic stimulus, they will do it very fast. And this is also part of the resilience of the Chinese economy.
You also research and work a lot with multinational companies, MNCs.
Yeah.
How do you see their operations in the last couple of years or in this year? How did it change?
First off, I think my answer may be a little bit selection biased because I mostly deal with larger multinationals, which usually have already had a very deep and wide presence in the China market, right? So for those multinationals, I think there are many of them are from Germany. Interestingly, their strategy is like further localized in the China market. Localization is not really a new word for multinationals in China, but at this stage, delocalization has some new meanings. Now, previously, they probably localized their production, localized some of their management, but nowadays we see more and more this localization R&D, which I think is already done by many multinationals, localize their supply chain and try to get more local vendors, try to get more local market. And number three, which is very interesting, is starting from last year, we see more and more foreign invest companies or multinationals started to localize their finance. So they try to finance their operation locally in China, using RMB to do investment in China. So essentially make the China corporate operation more self-sufficient and at the same time enable them to catch the China market more, quickly compared with the old days.
Yeah, and you mentioned in an article that China's growing innovation capacities basically offer entrepreneurs significant opportunities to also build globally competitive businesses, right? I can really imagine that because Thomas and me recently, we've been also to Huawei in Shenzhen, and I mean, it's not a startup anymore, but they behave very entrepreneurial and they're extremely innovative. And what will come out there is it's frightening me when I think about our, let's say, our car industry in Germany, for example. But what advice do you have for entrepreneurs in China, be it Chinese entrepreneurs or foreign entrepreneurs?
Okay. I think the number one advice I would like to give is really need to leverage China's innovation ecosystem. So in Chinese, we have old saying that don't build a car behind a closed door, 闭门造车, right? So basically means that you cannot do everything by yourself and not just on your own. I actually know many founders of startups, which most of them have some technology backgrounds. They say, okay, I want to develop best technologies. I want to do it myself. I don't want other people know what I'm doing. I don't think that will work very well in China. So try to leverage ecosystem. So in this ecosystem, first of all, we have the big corporates like Huawei, like any other big Chinese or multinationals as well in China. You try to figure out if you have something that they don't have and try to collaborate with them. A lot of startups will think, okay, I'm trying to get a market from this big multinational, so I better try to avoid to interact with them. That's not really a good strategy. And also we have this kind of government in the ecosystem. In China, there are so much support from different levels of government on innovation. So I think no matter is a local entrepreneur or a foreign entrepreneur in China, you should try to figure out what kind of support you can get from the government. And in this sense, many local governments really have a quite professional business mindset. They will figure out, are your products going to have a big market? Is it worth it for me to invest or engage or support you? So along this way, you can also figure out, okay, where your market might potentially be, based on your interaction with the government. Number three is I think for many startups, number two is that you have to pay more attention to market before developing your technology or solution or products. It sounds like cliche, but really when I talk to a lot of startup entrepreneurs, it's very easy to lose that focus along the way. You try too much to just make your product better, make your technology better, but don't forget where's the market. And sometimes spending a little bit more time to figure out your market can be more important than developing your product. So overall, I think number 3, I think it's specifically for foreigners doing startup in China, is that I have a lot of foreign friends. When they come to China, the first thing amazes them is that the size of China market, right? But my point is that do not constrain yourself on the China market, because there's so many, products, solutions, business models developed here that can be used in other markets, even your home market. So try to target the global market as your target market, not just the China market. Okay?
You already mentioned before the demographic challenges the Chinese economy faces. One is the aging population, one is the shrinking workforce, not enough children are born. Yeah. So how do you see these factors influencing the future growth and trends of the Chinese economy?
Yeah, I think if we just talk about population aging or this kind of low birth rate, or the shrinking of the labor force, I think its impact on the supply side would be limited, or more specifically, its impact on the productivity will be very limited. The reason is because increasingly we see that in China, automation has started very early, and nowadays most companies are thinking about AI, and all this new technology combined together will actually reduce the demand for labor going forward. So the impact on the supply side will not be that significant, but its negative impact on the demand side can be significant. When people get old, they do have smaller spending incentive. Some of them have smaller spending capacity as well. So that will impact the demand side. So I think when I talk to other economists, I think most of us agree on that part. And you can see that the government has been working on this already. There are different initiatives trying to promote more consumption from the elderly people. But I think what can really change the market is that the consumer companies really start to act, to design new products, to create new solutions, service to the elder people. But even with all these policies or with all the changing strategies of the consumer companies, I think inevitably when China has more elderly people, the consumer market will have to experience this challenge. The aggregate demand inevitably will be negatively impacted by these trends. But quantitatively, how much that will impact China's economic growth going forward, I don't really have a good number at this moment. But as I said at the beginning, looking forward, and always that there are always new solutions to some problems that we thought we could never be able to resolve, right? So going forward, I think if there are some new technology, and also it depends on China's social security system. When it becomes more sophisticated, they might partially offset that impact as well.
The Chinese government has now recently rolled out a few measures also to energize the economy. How do you assess the effectiveness of these?
Yeah, I think this economic stimulus in China is actually not new. In 2023, I think we had this like a 1 trillion RMB special loan, right? Special bond. Starting in 2024, actually the stimulus came out as early as in March, when we had this like a trade-in for consumer products and have the equipment renewal for companies. But the total size of that stimulus is not big enough. I think it was rounded like several hundred billion RMB. It's not big enough. So that's why a lot of economists has been calling for more aggressive fiscal stimulus. Now, in September, we had this big policy meeting basically China's central bank, People's Bank of China, China's Central Regulation Committee on the stock market, and China's this General Regulation Bureau of the Financial Industry. They actually have a very clear message to the public that the regulators intend to somewhat deregulate the capital market, bring more animal spirit into the capital market. And the People's Bank of China say basically we are ready to buy stocks. So that's somewhat similar to what United States did during the 2008 financial crisis, as China's version of quantitative easing, right? I think we have been seeing that capital market has been responded very aggressively. At the beginning, I think right after that statement in September 24th, you see China stock markets boomed, continued for like a week before the long holiday. Most recently started to cool down a little bit, but I think going forward, the capital market will continue to going up because of this kind of policy change. And the most recent news actually came from the fiscal side. In the October 12th, we have this new rounds of fiscal stimulus stated by the Minister of Finance. Just this morning, there's a new policy from China's regulatory state department on the real estate sector, basically trying to lower the down payment, give real estate company more loans, etc. So I think how this policy will affect China's overall GDP growth in the remaining months, I think is going to help China to reach its growth target 5% of this year. By the way, the third quarter growth number has not been published yet. My personal calculation basically indicates that it's going to be lower than 5%, probably 4.5. But with this new stimulus, it's likely we're going to reach 5% for a whole year. Now, I think the more important thing about this stimulus is not really, because if you look at a lot of analysis about the stimulus, a lot of people ask the question is how large exactly that stimulus is. How much money exactly the Minister of Finance is going to put in the economy. I think that's not the most important factor. The most important factor is actually the determination of the government, which will be transmitted to the consumers. So when the consumers see, okay, the government is very confident, they would like to borrow, they would like to spend, maybe I should spend as well. Maybe the world is not as uncertain as I thought. So that's the most important part of the stimulus.
We had a podcast guest recently from Germany who said that she thinks that China has in a lot of industries already overtaken a lot of players from the Western countries. Yeah. So what do you think, which are the three industries that China right now is the strongest?
You mean three strongest industries?
Yeah, where it is like stronger than, for example, companies from the US or from Europe?
Actually, the number one, of course, is EV industry. I can share a conversation I had with the big German automotive maker.
Yes, please. We are very interested.
Of course, I won't tell their name, but I think this conversation was in late 2022. So at that time, I was talking to them about what's happening in the China automotive market. So I told them if you look at EV market in China, it's a training ground. Basically, you have to invest here, you have to play with local players, but you may not win this market. However, if you don't play in this market, you're going to lose other markets. So that's my opinion in 2022. I think nowadays, when you talk to any German automakers, I think most of them have a similar view. EV makers really are very competitive. The second industry, I think most of you probably already know, is the renewable energy, including the solar panels, wind power, and nuclear power as well. So that's also the part that many Chinese companies, if you look at Europe and the US market on this renewable energy sector, including energy storage, I don't think there are any other country with a similar amount of competitive companies as China has. The third one, I think, is really China's, manufacturing industry as a whole. So that spans to all different industries. You have companies making furniture, you have companies making these tables. As long as they're doing manufacturing, I think the Chinese company has been very sophisticated in terms of integrated supply chain, make the production process more efficient, and in turn, make the most affordable products to the world.
Yeah, now the Chinese, as we said, Chinese companies are getting or have become really strong, leading in many industries. What will be the role of international corporations in China and in the Chinese economy in the coming years?
Chinese company needs cooperation when they go global, right? You see Chinese companies not only just for foreign market. Right now, I talk to many Chinese companies. The large ones of them are really not just looking for markets. They are looking for achieving the goal of becoming global multinationals. So if you want to be a multinational, like any multinational we see nowadays, you have to have global operation. You have to interact with their local partners, the local government, local clients, local customers, local suppliers. So in this way, cooperation, of course, is inevitable for them, for these Chinese companies. And number two, I think innovation, China's innovation. So we all talk about how innovative the Chinese companies are nowadays and how strong China's innovation capacity is nowadays. But don't forget, a lot of this innovation really needs cooperation from different industries. Even if you think about semiconductors, it involves a long supply chain that requires a lot of collaboration. And the number three, I think China also needs cooperation with international partners in terms of how to rebuild a global supply chain network. Different companies do have different targets, objectives, and different multinationals have their own strategy to adjust themselves to this new changing global landscape. But I firmly believe that China will remain as the central part of the global supply chain, but with some modification. And this kind of change cannot be done by China itself in this cooperation.
So our last question goes to you as an optimistic economist. We are really interested in your opinion. What do you think? How will the Chinese and the global economy develop over the next few years?
I would like to start with the Chinese economy first. We all know the Chinese economy is experiencing a transition period, which can take longer than we expected. So during this transition period, we can see a lot of shocks, a lot of uncertainties. The consumer spending will be very cautious, which makes the economic growth very slow. But don't remember, it's a transition period. And so far as I can see, all the transitioning is happening as what I expected. You have the increase in capacity, even though demand is weak. You have this changing international relations, but eventually there's going to be a new equilibrium. So going forward, I think all the advantage or strengths of the Chinese economy as innovation capacity, supply chain, and market itself will actually be there. And at the same time, once the demand actually opens for the China products or services with this new global trade order, I think you're going to see a very strong growth coming back for Chinese economy. Now, for the world, first of all, China is like 17 or 18% of the world GDP. So a faster growth of Chinese economy, of course, contributes to global economic growth. At the same time, I think in the world as a whole, at the same time, there are new emerging technology that is likely to drive the growth. I'm talking about AI, renewable energy, etc. And also at the same time, I think the world is expecting a new equilibrium, a new trade order, a new global economic system. And with this new equilibrium, I think the world is likely to regain its growth momentum.
Dr. Zhang, let us finish this episode with a compliment for you. Thank you so much for this interesting insights. It was a very, very interesting episode for me. I learned a lot.
100%. Couldn't agree more. Dr. Zhang, very nice having you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here, and thanks for all the audience.